Hey everybody, Thrash Til Death here. Well, I just earlier on today got the new album by Amon Amarth, Surtur Rising, which just came out in the UK today. As you're probably aware, Amon Amarth have been on a massive winning streak ever since 2006 when they released their album With Odin on Our Side to the critical acclaim of absolutely everybody, and rightfully so. That album's amazing. And since then they've released Twilight of the Thunder God, which I have to admit I skipped when it came out, mostly because I was spending money on other things at the time, but partly because two of the tracks, the two that got released in advance of that album, didn't particularly impress me. Twilight of the Thunder God, Guardians of Asgard didn't really do much for me. Not bad songs, but just felt like sort of they were going through the motions for Amon Amarth. But now we have Surtur Rising, and Amon Amarth, you know what to expect going into one of their albums. They're a band who have found their niche over the last few years or so, or increasingly so ever since their debut album. We know going into an Amon Amarth album that we're going to come out the other side wanting to grow a beard and plunder a village. But the good thing about the band is that it's the good kind of niche. We know that we know what to expect, but there's still enough wiggle room for them to go about their songwriting and still manage to throw us a few curveballs, just come at us from a direction we haven't anticipated. We know that we're going to want to grow a beard and plunder a village, but we don't know how exactly they're going to make us go about making us feel that this particular time. So yeah, even though we know what to expect, a new Amon Amarth album can still sound youthful and surprising in its own way, even 8 albums down the line. And Surtur Rising, I'm pleased to report, delivers everything that we expect from Amon Amarth. We've got the good, solid death metal vibe, but infused with a good deal of melodicism, really deep death growls, good ominous atmosphere, while at the same time having epic and anthemic chorus lines. All of the usual stuff that we've come to expect from AA is there. But there's also an added dimension to it this time that just kind of took me off guard. And I'm glad it did, because Surtur Rising is... I was expecting great things from this album. Obviously it's Amon Amarth, so we hold them to a pretty high standard. But this album's even better than I was expecting it to be going in. And I think the reason for that is that this is probably the most emotionally charged Amon Amarth album to date. A lot of the songs on here, like Slaves of Fear, Last Stand of Frey, what's it called? Live Without Regrets, the 5th track. These are all very... These songs are just as rousing and anthemic as we come to know Amon Amarth for being. But at the same time, they've almost got an edge of sort of sadness and melancholy to them. It's not, but it's at the same time, it's not wussy sadness. It's sort of the sadness of a single tear rolling down a Viking raider's cheek before he goes off and raids an entire village and eats their faces. But it does end up adding a whole other dimension to the music that just gives it a sort of extra layer of dynamism and authenticity. You just connect to it on one more level. In addition to it being dramatic and exciting, it's now got kind of an edge of poignancy to it as well. Probably my favourite track on this album is the 6th one, Last Stand of Frey, which obviously Amon Amarth have done this whole sort of warrior who knows they're about to die, just going to make their last stand battle. They've done that sort of theme in their songs to death any number of times, particularly effectively with Runes to My Memory, I think, but this is probably the best it's ever been. It seems to me that Amon Amarth, their songs have always had this sort of element of storytelling to them. They've always sort of told this sort of story of a Viking warrior in some sort of capacity, going into battle or dying in battle or coming back from battle or whatever. But it seems to me that Amon Amarth have really played up this sort of narrative side to their songs this time. And now, in addition to sort of just being exciting and brutal as we've come to expect them to be, they've got more emotional nuance, strange though it might be to apply that term to an Amon Amarth album. Because although nuance isn't exactly what you expect going in, it is sort of there. For a given value of sophisticated, there is sophisticated songwriting going on in this album. The songs follow sort of an observable arc, a dramatic arc, from beginning through conflict through to conclusion. Far more so than their earlier songs have done, which is just sort of the usual structure of verse, chorus, riff, solo. Yeah, it seems Amon Amarth have gone to much more theatrical, dramatic ambitions in this album. And even though it's still constrained within their sort of usual style of riffing and growling and melodic soloing, it does just have that sort of extra edge to it this time. It seems like they're just sort of straining at the creative leash, just going to more exciting and dynamic melodic ideas. And so yeah, this album is, up to a point, surprising, even while it's delivering sort of the same good old Amon Amarth experience that we've come to know and love. And of course, that experience is still there. One particular thing I always found about Amon Amarth is Johan Hegg. Is now that Lord Worm's buggered off and now he's teaching English to French students or something like that, Johan Hegg is probably the best guttural growler singer in the business. Honestly, his voice, he's able to plunge to these incredible depths of these growls, but at the same time he still manages to remain remarkably intelligible, and even gets a degree of passion and emotion across in his voice. It's almost this sort of dramatic oration a lot of the time, and it just comes across exceptionally well. He just seems like the real deal as a frontman. You could almost believe that he's a Viking who got frozen in a glacier 1,000 years ago, and he just woke up and decided to found a metal band. He sounds great. If I had to lay a complaint against Surtur Rising, and I guess I do, is that I'd say at some points it almost becomes too mellow. There are points. I think probably the song Tox Taunt, Loki's Treachery Part 2, was probably the worst offender for this. Amon Amarth sometimes go into this very clean picking style of riff, and it sort of undermines this very brutal, savage aesthetic that they've carved out for themselves, this sort of 300 Conan the Barbarian sort of savagery that they've got going on. And sometimes they just sort of undermine that with this very silky, more vanilla sort of melodeath riff, and it just sort of, they might be perfectly melodic and nice on their own terms, but they just sort of undermine this sort of aesthetic that they've established. But at the same time, that could be, you could just describe that to the sort of growing level of dynamism that their songwriting's got. And I guess that's fair enough. It just sort of just personal preference, I suppose. For me, still my favourite Amon Amarth album is their debut album, Once Sent from the Golden Hall. To my mind, they've never managed to be quite as epic and just never quite managed to reach that same level of intensity and savagery. But in a weird way, gradually, almost imperceptibly over the course of their career, Amon Amarth have evolved. Their songwriting has become more mature, more sophisticated, and with each progressive album they just strain at the leash just a little bit more. And Surtur Rising is definitely the most ambitious and creative effort so far. And even if I did have problems with the more mellow moments, it does more than make up for it with songs like Destroyer of the Universe and The Beast Am I. These songs are probably almost the closest to pure death metal they've ever done. And yeah, just awesome, brutal, chunky riffs flying all from all directions. Honestly, just absolutely top-notch, stellar experience from beginning to end. Better than With Odin on Our Side, I honestly think, and within a hair's breadth of being as good as Once Sent from the Golden Hall. So if you're into melodic death metal, or pretty much any kind of metal at all, you owe it to yourself to check out Surtur Rising, one of the best albums I've heard so far this year. So yeah, Surtur Rising, buy it. I'm Thrash Til Death, and I'll see you again soon. Goodbye.